Hey everyone, welcome back to Empty Chairs. My name is Justin, and today I'm doing another reaction video. This one to Jason Evert and his video, Homosexuality, Gay Marriage, and Holiness. Now, I think I remember the first time I watched this video, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the message of the Catholic Church. You know, it just felt like it resonated on so many levels. And I remember as a missionary, like sending this to people, being like, this is the teachings of the church. Like this is how we should be engaging with LGBT people. This is how we should be talking to them. Like he even talks about forgiveness. You know, the church asking for forgiveness at the end. Look at this. This is amazing. So it's gonna be really interesting to go back and watch this now. You know, it's been a little bit since I've watched it and kind of see how it lands now as somebody who is Catholic and now out as a gay person.
Well, I think the world will tell you when it comes to homosexuality, you only got two options. You know, option number one, you can hide in the closet out of fear that if anyone knew you felt that way, they would hate you and be bigoted against you. Or if you want to live in the closet, and frankly it would, it's not a very comfortable living arrangement, then come out of the closet, embrace your sexual attractions as your identity, forget about God, the church, and the Bible, and do whatever you want with your body. So those are your options. Okay?
Jason, we are not off to a good start, okay? So we have a false dichotomy for starters here. We have live in shame in the closet and stay Catholic, or come out, make being gay your whole identity, you know, just throw away the church and all of those things. And as someone who is Catholic and both gay, I just want to say, maybe those aren't the two options here that we have. And he does kind of talk about how there's a third way. We'll kind of talk about how that's not, I don't think exactly the best third way, or not exactly, you know, a really great option here. But I just want to say, yeah, as somebody who has literally had hundreds and hundreds of conversations with people, you know, with friends, people I know in person, online, people coming out don't inherently make being gay their whole identity. In fact, I struggle to think of a single person I have ever met inside the church, outside the church, you know, people who have no connection to religion or spirituality whatsoever, people who have made being gay their entire identity, or LGBT, you know, their entire identity here. And so, you know, and so many of those people as well, especially people that I've gotten to meet through my platform who experience same-sex attractions, who are LGBT and love the church, love their faith, and want to stay connected. So, false dichotomy, not great.
Or gay shame, now make your choice. Now, imagine you feel kind of stuck in the middle here. Okay, wait a minute. I don't really want to reject God, but I mean, gay shame? Is that my only option? Shame? I mean, why should I feel ashamed if it's an attraction I never chose? It's not like I woke up, it's like, oh, it's Tuesday, I think I'll be attracted to this person today. No, you don't choose your attractions, just your behavior. So why should you feel shame at something you never chose? Will people hate you for having these?
I get frustrated with that phrasing of like, and I know he's just kind of sliding it in here, right? Super slick. You don't choose your attractions, you know, you choose your behaviors. I understand that, but I think so often that ideology is used to reduce experiencing same-sex attractions to having sex. But we know from heterosexual people that they are attracted to the opposite sex, but there's also this whole rich emotional experience of falling in love with someone, of you know, a deep friendship that is the basis of a healthy relationship. And so I think so often for Catholics talking about homosexuality, it's reduced to behavior, it's reduced to having sex, and we forget and overlook the emotional experience that is also present in the lives of people with same-sex attraction, in the lives of LGBT people. Okay? Let's make sure we're treating humans as humans.
I'm sorry, yeah, sometimes they will. You know, and unfortunately, these people are out there. You see them on TV with their signs, God hates gays. I'm like, no, God hates your stupid sign. Okay, you know, that's what he hates. But the problem is, fanatics like that make the world believe that if you believe in traditional marriage, you're a hateful, homophobic bigot. But is this the case? I don't think so. In fact, not long ago, I went to a store to buy a frame of a painting that an artist had made for me of Pope John Paul II. And I put the big painting down on the desk, and the framer came out, and he took one look at it, and he got kind of quiet. And he said, oh, Pope John Paul II. He said, I used to be a Catholic boy, but church doesn't want me anymore. I said, well, what do you mean the church doesn't want you? And he opened his heart up to me about homosexuality.
Okay, so he's like, he provides this really, you know, drastic example of, you know, the God hates gays signs, right? We all know those people. And then he's being like, well, look at me, you know? He's going to tell this story here of like, I'm not like that, you know, I'm nice. I'm a Catholic who loves you. But I want to say, you know, yes, I'm sure, I know that, I've never met Jason, but I'm sure he's a wonderful individual. But I just think that why is it that so many people, when they're engaging with the Catholic Church, that there is hesitancy there? Why for so many LGBT people is there the assumption that, or why do so many LGBT people feel rejected by the church? Why do so many LGBT people feel like the church hates them? And if your response is only, well, the church doesn't. I don't. I love you. That's a really defensive position, and that really kind of cuts off any sort of attempt at dialogue. Because instead of understanding, okay, no matter what has happened, no matter whether I am the person who hurt them or not, I have to say, if this LGBT person feels hurt by the church, if this person feels like the church doesn't want them, that the church, you know, hates them, my reaction can't be to dismiss that experience and say, well, I don't, Essentially, you're saying you're wrong. The church doesn't actually hate you. What you're feeling and what you're experiencing is wrong. That doesn't build bridges and is a continuation of the church rejecting the experience of LGBT individuals and isn't helpful.
And I said, no, the church wants you. This is your home. God loves you. I love you. He's like, what church do you go to?
See, right? He's like, you're wrong. This is your home. You should be welcome here. Like, why don't you just get with the program? Like, oh, Jason. Oh my gosh. Silly me as a gay man. You're right. I wasn't hurt by the church. I didn't feel rejected by Catholics. I don't get any hate comments from Catholics telling me I should, stop going to mass. I'm not wanted. You're so right. It's just that simple here. Okay. Okay, let me have a little bit of charity towards him. It is helpful for Catholics to say things like this, to affirm that LGBT people are welcome. But if we're simply saying the nice things, the things that oftentimes make Catholics feel comfortable, like you're welcome, you have a home, like join me for mass, without going in and reckoning with the hardships, the hurt that does exist between the church and LGBT individuals, we're never going to actually be able to build bridges. LGBT people are never going to be welcome and come back to our churches if the if the Catholic Church doesn't reckon with the harm and the hurt that does exist.
And I told him, at St. Mary's, you should come with me to mass sometime with my family. And we had a wonderful conversation. A couple weeks later, I came back, and I saw him there. Hey, how you doing? And he said, you remembered my name? And I said, yeah, how you been? And we had a fantastic conversation. About 10 minutes into it, his eyes started to turn a little red and moist. And he said, can I hug you? And I said, absolutely. He came up behind the counter around to me, just gave me this huge hug. It was just a beautiful moment. And I think that he was so touched because he knew I loved him. And I loved him enough to tell him the truth, that your sexual attractions are not your identity.
No! Okay, this guy wasn't getting emotional because you told him the truth. This guy was getting emotional because he probably had an experience of being treated like garbage from Catholics, and you were the first Catholic to actually treat him as a human and be kind to him. And like, this is kind of feels like a bait and switch here. It was like, let me just treat you in a nice enough way where I build we have trust, and then let me give you the truth, right? Let me tell you this isn't what you want. That experience that this guy had, that Jason being kind to this individual, like, we can't do that and have it be conditional love. Catholics can't approach LGBT people with, okay, if I just love LGBT people enough, if I just am kind enough, I say the right things, we have this cutesy moment and we give them a hug, boom, that's my moment where I come in and I tell them the truth. If your approach in engaging with LGBT people is, how do I build a friendship until I get to the point where I can finally tell them the church's teachings, right? That is a conditional relationship. That is a friendship with a very clear agenda. And any person, is going to be able to sniff that out. And the moment that switch happens, you've just undermined any sort of unconditional love. Because God and, Jesus does not approach you with, all right, I am going to, God doesn't approach me like, I'm going to love Justin until I feel like Justin is loved, and then I'm gonna drop some truth on him, and then we're gonna convince him that he's wrong. And then no. Jesus just loves me. Period. Jesus loves me. Jesus delights in me. Right. And the question of God's love for me is never conditional on whether or not what I'm doing or what I'm not doing here. I think for so many Catholics, this is the approach of, I'm going to approach LGBT people with my agenda because the most loving thing is to tell them the truth. When I think we forget that the most loving thing to do is what Jason did in this video. He simply met this guy and he loved him. And that has to be our starting point. We can't bring any more of an agenda into this. And Catholics are going to push back on this and say, but we need to eventually tell people the truth. We need to have that conversation. And as a former missionary, as somebody who had conversations like this so many times through my years, on campus and with students and with other people, specifically with LGBT people who did LGBT outreach, I think we forget sometimes that these are adults that we're dealing with. I've only met one person in the over 10 years that I've been engaging with LGBT people. I've met one person who is Catholic, was raised Catholic, and it wasn't until he was in his mid-20s that he was like, oh, I didn't realize, that you couldn't be gay and Catholic, or that you couldn't, be gay and get married to somebody of the same sex here. One person. Everybody else already knows. And I think having conversations like this brought up, having a whole relationship, turn on this one conversation, is so frustrating because we know what the church teaches. And instead of people saying, oh, this is harmful for you, this is hurtful for you as a person, like, I would just want a Catholic to be able to speak into my own life and saying, not assume anything about what is good for my life or bad, but just like actually see my life understand what my life actually is, understand my relationship with God and how I'm trying to love and serve God. And from there, then maybe you can tell me like, hey, I noticed this part of your life is unhelpful. But not just to blanket assume, I know you're gay, you are unhappy, you are unfulfilled, you are a sad, depressed, little same-sex attracted person, and I have the truth that I just need to tell you. Yeah, come on, we're better than this, Catholics.
That if I define myself by my sexual attractions, I don't know, my life's gonna get real confusing real fast. Because if I'm attracted to a woman who's not my wife, is that my identity? If I drive by a pornographic billboard and I think she's pretty, is that my identity? No. The world is telling us that, if you experience this feeling, that's who you are. There's all these different identities you can have. But the fact is, the Catholic Church doesn't think there's 58 different types of people in the world. Well, there's gay persons and lesbian persons, bisexual persons, transgender persons, and so on. Now, the Church is not gonna deny that some people have certain experiences, inclinations, and attractions, but what the Church affirms is that a person is a rational being. And what that means is there's really only 3 kinds of persons. There's divine persons.
Okay, so this is one of the moments where Catholics meaning well can be really dismissive, because we can hold 2 things in tension at the same time. So we can understand, I'm sure he's going to talk at some point about our fundamental identity being a child of God, right? Awesome. My fundamental identity is a child of God. To any Catholic watching this, or any other Christian watching this, I am on the same page with Jason here. That is my fundamental identity. I am fundamentally a human person here, and I also happen to be gay. That's part of my experience here. And so I just think we use these words and we use these labels to help communicate our experience. This is just one of the ways that we help share. And I think he's right. All these labels are just imperfect ways of describing their experience. But an imperfect way is a whole lot better than no way at all. And so for me, the term gay is just a way to succinctly and briefly describe the fact that I'm someone who is exclusively or predominantly attracted to men. Nothing more than that, okay? I do think there's something that maybe you go back a few decades, that it seems like there was a lot more of an association between people using the term gay and in a very specific way that people were living. But I just think that this is being so dismissive for LGBT people. And I think this is really unhelpful for Catholics who are watching this, because then this ingrains in their minds, oh my gosh, if I hear somebody use the term gay, my evangelization flags go up, and I'm like, I need to reach out to this person because they are a lost sheep and they're making being gay their whole identity. I just be like, can we just pause when somebody says, hey, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, they share this part of their life. Maybe they say, hey, let me talk about my same-sex partner in conversation very casually. Just take note of is this person's whole identity, or did they just share a part of their life in the same way that you might share about your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. We don't overreact to that.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There's angelic persons, the holy angels, and the fallen angels, the demons, and then there's human persons, made male and female in the image and likeness of God. And so if you're a human who has homosexual attractions, you know what kind of person you are? You're a son of God or you're a daughter of God. That is the deepest truth about your identity. And you might think, that's nice and everything, but what does that mean on a day-to-day basis? I basically either have to obey the church and live a life of loneliness and desolation, or disregard the church and face damnation. Are these my only 2 options? Damnation or desolation? Well, thankfully, those aren't the only 2 choices. In fact, it might sound surprising, but the church is not telling anybody that they can't love. In fact, I would argue that the Catholic Church is just about one of the only institutions on earth that's actually challenging us all to truly love. But the fact is, I think our idea of love often needs to be redeemed. Look at what Pope John Paul II had to say about love. We must not forget that love for a human being must also contain certain elements of struggle. Struggle for the beloved human being and his or her true good. The difficulty is the world tells us that sex equals love. And if you can't have sex, then you're not really loving. But the fact is, sometimes abstinence is a tremendous expression.
Okay, Jason, we can do this here. So we see here the beginnings, kind of that follow-up of you don't choose your attractions, you choose your behavior. This is the beginning of that follow-up of, essentially saying the world says sex equals love. So again, he's kind of building this case and building this worldview that people who experience same-sex attractions, they're saying, I want to come out so I can have sex. Therefore, anybody who experiences same-sex attraction, they just want to have sex, and that's all there is to it. So we're not. He's so kind, right? We're not saying people can't love. The church is calling us to love. We're just saying you can't have sex. It's just that simple here. But this kind of ignores, just kind of totally glosses over the interior life of the human person. If he's going to bring up John Paul II, then I would like to bring up something else as well. So before he was John Paul II, right, Karl Wojtyła wrote Love and Responsibility here. And in that book, he talks about how sensuality itself is the foundation for love. It's the raw stuff that can then develop into love. And so I think this is an important distinction, because people like Jason are not going to bring this up, but there is this subtle assumption within his work and a lot of other Catholics that there actually is only heterosexuality, right? That this is the only true sexuality that exists, right? Man was created for woman, woman for man, and that's it, and everything else is just a deviation. But I think it's important to note that sensuality that John Paul II talks about is the raw stuff of love, that it impacts. He talks about how that initial drive impacts how we do relate to people, who we're drawn to. And as any person would tell you, right, who I'm attracted to is not simply a sexual thing. That for me, I'm not just wanting to have sex with men, but for me, it's something far deeper. It's who at the deepest level do I want to share my heart with, right? Who do I imagine sharing my life with? It's not just who do I want to sleep with at the end of the night. And so I think what is such a disservice when Catholics are talking about this and saying, oh, this is just behavior, right? That abstinence is a good thing, is that it's denying that interior life, that this isn't just a desire for sex, but this is a desire for an emotional connection. And I know for me, when I heard a video like this, it's like, okay, fine, I just need to deny this part of my life. I just need to deny this sexual attraction that I had. But I'm not just denying that sexual attraction. I'm actually, if I'm denying, this draw that I have, this raw, foundational material, this raw material for love, I'm actually denying that need for connection and belonging, right? This draw that I have to share my heart with other men. And I know for me, it was so isolating and so lonely because I heard this video, right? I just needed to deny myself. And I always saw men, therefore, as a source of temptation, right? That these are men that, I'm called to be friends with men, to have healthy, disinterested friendships on one hand, but then on the other hand, they're a source of temptation. I can't get too close to them. That any sort of draw or desire to be with them must inherently be sexual, right? Because it's behavior. I don't just want to be emotionally close to them. I must want to have sex with them. And so it kept me really distant from other friends. It made me feel so isolated in so many ways. And I was like, well, this is just my cross. I guess, everyone just experienced loneliness. I guess I'm just experiencing the loneliness of the Christian journey, and this is just my cross that I need to pick up. And so I just wish when we were having these conversations, but we could talk about them not reducing people to experience same-sex attractions, LGBT people just wanting to have sex, but to have a conversation about that desire for connection. That it's not just sex, it's an emotional connection with another person. It's who we want to share our heart and our lives with. And I think if we could have meaningful conversations where we acknowledge the deep and rich emotional lives of LGBT people, then I think we could actually start to build bridges and have conversations. And Catholics could actually start to understand why so many LGBT people feel hurt and rejected by the church.
Sacrificial love. This is hard to see, though, because our world is so hypersexualized. I mean, think about it. You turn on the TV, every product, every car, every piece of gum, this deodorant, everything becomes sexualized. And it's just gotten ridiculous. I was at a store and I saw a magazine there. It was like a craftsmanship, a woodworking magazine, carpentry, and it said on the cover that inside were the blueprints for sexy shutters. And I'm like, oh, come on.
What magazines are you reading?
Sexy shutters? I mean, could you imagine if you were at home and one of your friends came over and he came in your kitchen and he said, wow, you have some really sexy shutters in your kitchen. You'd be like, wow, you're a really weird friend. But this is the culture that we live in. Products are sexualized. Our friendships are over-sexualized. If you're a guy and you really like hanging out with another guy and you really enjoy being in his company, people are like, hey, you kind of have a little bromance going on over there? No, we're not. This is a health.
Okay, the problem is comments like that are coming from Catholics, right? Like, I remember how worried I was when I was a student, when I was a missionary, of being suspected of being too close to another guy. Like, this wasn't just some, this is from the world, like, bromance thing. Like, literally, like, you could totally call me pretty lame when I was in college. Like junior year, all I did was live at the Newman Center. So it wasn't like I was having this fear of being found out that I was gay from the world. My fear of being found out as experiencing same-sex attractions was from men in the Catholic Church. And so while this is like a really cute example here of, the world is over-sexualizing relationships, it's a bromance or whatever, that's the culture in a lot of places within the Catholic Church. And I think for so many people who experience same-sex attractions, that's one of the reasons why there's so much isolation, is because it's not just I'm trying to carry my cross, but I'm also, don't want anyone to suspect this part of my life. At least that's how I was living when I was a student, when I was a missionary, and I'm sure people suspected things, but this is in our churches, right? This isn't the world. This is the culture that exists.
Masculine friendship. And the same is happening in other places. Well, girls hanging out with a lot of girls. Well, you seem to spend a lot of time with her. I mean, you really seem to be drawn to her. Do you have like a girl crush over there?
And I think the problem is too, like, I remember for me, hearing videos like this and hearing voices from other Catholics, how I had to interpret it was like, all right, if being attracted to men is not of God, if this is a disordered attraction, then I need to reorder it. So if I'm reordering this desire to have sex with men, this sexualization of men, then the true desire that's underneath that is friendship for men. So therefore, anytime I'm attracted to men, or there's that source of temptation, then I'm like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I need to reinterpret this. I need to reorient this. I don't actually desire sex with a man. I just desire deep friendship with a man. And so I need to focus on that. And so I know for me, the first time I actually found myself falling in love with another guy, I didn't actually know how to interpret that as actual like romantic attraction, because for so much of my life, I was just like, this is just friendship. This is just friendship. And so things kind of progressed, and there was really a relationship that was developing and building there that I was kind of blind to. I was just like, no, we're just friends. We're just deep friends. This is just, healthy male friendship. When before I knew it, I was like, oh shoot, I am totally falling for this guy. And I wish that instead of glossing over and pretending like there isn't romantic attraction there, like I wish somebody would have just helped me understand what was going on in my heart, and instead of training me or brainwashing me to say, no, this is just friendship. You just want friendship. Let's help people understand their interior life. And I can't help but think how much more helpful that would have been in that moment if instead I was like, oh my gosh, this is what romantic feelings are like. This is what everybody was talking about in junior high and high school, like catching feelings for someone and the butterflies. I had no words to describe that until I was like, oh shoot, this is too late. I'm totally head over heels for the guy. And so I wish, instead of trying to reinterpret things and say, it's not romance, it's just, for me, yes, it was a bromance. There was a romance that was going on there. And I think so many straight guys are afraid of having close male friendships because they're afraid of being accused of having same-sex attractions, not from things that the world is doing, but because of the language in the church. Because if you hear words like, intrinsically disordered, oriented towards a grave moral evil, you're going to want to avoid that. You're not going to want to be associated with that. And so, yeah, this totally impacts straight men, not because of something the world's doing, but because of the language that the church is doing. Because of the language that the church is using.
What I don't understand is that you might not have heard this before, but you're supposed to be attracted to members of the same sex. You heard that correctly, because God made them very good. And there's so much about us that's attractive. Your wit, your humor, your personality, even your beauty is supposed to be attractive. And not every attraction is sexual.
Okay.
In fact, I knew a guy who lived a very actively promiscuous gay lifestyle.
I'm going to stop here before he gives an example. I'm not going to say anything about Jason. But I will say for other people, and I am genuinely talking about other people that I've heard Catholics talking about this, to respond to this, I just want to highlight a person that I was friends with for a number of years. We were kind of accountability partners in experiencing same-sex attractions. He was somebody about my age. And I remember he ultimately, we're helping each other grow in our faith, overcome these same-sex attractions, and ultimately he met a woman and got married. Several years later, I came out, and he called me up, and he's like, "Why are you doing this? This is why can't you just get married to a woman like I did?" And I try to explain, like, bro, I'm not attracted to women. I'll be like, I can find women beautiful. I understand that they're beautiful. There's beauty there, but there is not that sexual attraction that's there for me at all. And it was only years later he had to call me up again and be like, "Oh, Justin, I realize now. I'm attracted to both men and women. I'm sexually attracted to both men and women, and that is part of my experience." And so I think for so many Catholics who are saying, why you can choose to overcome this, why can't you just marry somebody of the opposite sex? I think many people who are often frustrated by people who experience same-sex attractions might themselves be individuals who are both attracted to men and women. I'm not making any statement on Jason here. I'm really not. But I just think that's important to acknowledge.
And after years of this, he said, "You know what I realized after all this time?" He said, "I realized I wasn't homosexual." He said, "I realized I was homo-emotional. I was longing for the attention, the approval, the affection, and the admiration of another man, which I never received from my own father. And the world has taught me to sexualize my problems."
Okay, so this is the other thing I see Catholics doing, because if we do ever bring up like the emotional connection, it is always in the context of daddy issues. Which I'm just like, come on, people, okay? As somebody who, in many ways, you could say fits kind of your perfect model for, all right, I didn't have the perfect relationship with my dad, I didn't have all of the straight guy hobbies, my best friend from something like 3rd grade through like 6th grade, was another girl, paint your perfect picture of my upbringing turned me gay. I have been in therapy for 10 years now, working through my trauma, the hurts, like everything that you want to say that I work through that might be contributing to this, everything about kind of how my unmet needs as a child, it contributed my sexualization. I have spent so much time in therapy, and over all that time, my attraction to men has not shifted a single bit. I am just as attracted to men now as I was at 25, at 20, at 15. And so, I just think that it's, once again, so dismissive to say there's an emotional connection that's sexualized, right? You only desire, to have sex because you have some unmet emotional needs. I can say for myself and for so many other LGBT people, I feel very content in my emotional needs being met right now. I am not turning towards sex to have my emotional needs met, and I'm still attracted to men. So what do you want me to do with that, Jason?
I'm not saying from this that nobody has sexual attractions for members of the same sex, but simply that not all attractions are sexual. And so for those people who do have sexual attractions, where does this leave them? Some people think, well, what does this mean? I can't love? We can't get married? I mean, what does the church hate us? Is the church bigoted against us? I mean, what about, marriage equality? Well, I think the problem with marriage equality is that that slogan might fit well on a bumper sticker, but it really doesn't say anything. And here's why. If I wanted to marry 2 women, are you in favor of marriage equality for us? Most people would say, well, no, Jason. I mean, if you can't make up your mind, then that's not really a marriage. Okay, fair enough. Well, let's say I pick one. And we want to have a marriage that's open. In other words, we'll marry each other, but we're open to having affairs with other people mutually. We're agreed to this. Do you think that's a marriage? Are you in favor of marriage equality? Most people would say, no, you got to be faithful. Okay, well, let's say I'll be faithful. But we don't want it to be permanent. Instead of, entering into wedlock, we're going to have kind of wed lease. Kind of like a 10-year marriage license. And if things are working out after 10 years, we'll get another one. And if they're not working out, well, then no hard feelings. Most people would say, no, marriage also needs to be permanent. Okay, well, I saw a woman on the news recently who married herself. Is that a real marriage?
So I heard examples like this all the time. Like I remember I was in training to be a focused missionary, and they were talking about here's the non-theological argument for why we should not support same-sex marriages, and they brought up all of these examples as counter. Like look, like this isn't what marriage is about, right? We shouldn't be supporting this. It's for the rearing of the kids, and as at the time I kind of was in a little bit of a Catholic bubble. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like look at the headlines. There's people who want this sort of thing. And I just think this is a little bit of like a straw man argument of kind of picking out some dramatic examples that sound really catchy and seem like, oh my gosh, this is proving such a good point. But as somebody who has had so many conversations with people who are outside of the church, I think by and large, like people want to be in stable, loving relationships that are together for the entirety of their life with one person. I know something that I talk about with a number of LGBT people through the years, has been meeting people who are like, oh my gosh, in gay men specifically, who are like, there's so much, there's this narrative around gay men, just want to have hookups and have open relationships. Like I am looking for monogamy with one man for the rest of my life. And so I think it's really easy to have clickbaity examples here, but I just want to be like, Jason, let's talk with real people. Like let's not get sucked into the headlines here of that one woman. Like what really are the broad experiences of people inside and out the church, inside the church and outside of the church. And I think that it is far closer to this idea of monogamy, lifelong partnership, than these dramatic examples that we're bringing up. I know they happen. I know these are real things, but these are outliers, okay?
For most of these cases, do you hate these people? Are you bigoted against them? No, because it's not about hatred. It's not about bigotry. It's about one thing. What is marriage? And in all these cases I just presented to you, you'll notice the question is not, may they get married, as if it's a question of permission. The question is, can that be a real marriage? It's a question of possibility. So it's not about, equality and fairness. It's about what is marriage. And in order to answer this question, we can't simply be guided by our sentiments and our emotions and our heart. We also need to use our intellect. Because if marriage means anything, then it means that some things aren't marriage. And so the question is, where did it come from? Is it simply a human institution ratified by the government? Or is marriage from God the Father? And if it is, then what the church teaches is that when it's talking about marriage, it's not primarily talking about what two people do, they exchange vows and they stay together, but primarily what marriage is what two people become, a visible image of Christ's love for his bride, the church. Earlier in the program, we had talked about how this love, when it's sexual, should reflect God's love. It should be free, total, faithful, and fruitful. Now, two people of the same sex could be faithful to one another. They could enter into a relationship without being forced by another person, but the question is, can their bodies totally give themselves to the other? Can their sexual union, by nature, be fruitful? And the answer is no. And this is not about hate speech or bigotry. It's just about biology, because marriage is not consummated by two people doing something sexual. A marriage is consummated by the two becoming one flesh. And some will argue, well, the church just needs to be a lot more tolerant than it is. But you were not created to be tolerated. You were created to be loved. And if you love somebody, you can't lie to them. You can't pretend a false compassion to be more merciful than God is. When you love someone, you have to speak the truth to them. And part of the truth of Christianity is the cross. And this, no doubt, is one.
I think this little string of logic that we went through here of like, well, this is what marriage is for, It's not bigotry, it's not hate, it's just love. The most loving thing is the truth. And I think this is why Catholics have such a hard time engaging with LGBT people, because they watch videos like this. I watch videos like this, and whether you realize it consciously or subconsciously, it's like the most loving thing is the truth. The truth is two men can't be together because biology. And like that's all that Catholics have for people. That's their really only understanding and their marching orders for what it means to love LGBT people. And I just want to say, that's not loving. That is not actually trying to form a relationship with a person. That's just like saying your talking points. And I think that's why I've heard from so many people who are Catholic, especially parents or friends, and like, hey, somebody just came out to me. Like, what do I respond? I know what the church teaches, but it just feels so inadequate. I think it feels inadequate because we're reducing people to talking points of being like, the most loving thing is just boiling this down to the truth. And I think we can also understand that loving people is learning about their life, of being curious, of even if you're somebody who's going to be like, I agree 100% with what the church's teachings. I believe that this is true. That love is also being curious about, okay, like what is this? I know a gay couple in my neighborhood, right? What is that like? What is their partnership like? How did they meet? What do they love about the other person? What is their relationship like? And even though, people like Jason Evert might be like, hey, this can't happen. This isn't right. I have to imagine that there's some level of being able to see God's presence in that relationship, of being able to see the good that exists between these two men or these two women that love each other. And so if you're going to be loving to an individual, rather than treating it as like, okay, I have to tell them the truth, also consider, how are you actually loving them in a way that they experience love in return? How are you getting to know them as people? How are you not just writing them off as talking points, as people living in sin who need to be convinced to live otherwise, but how are you taking the time to see the good that does exist? Okay.
Your cross and follow him. It's difficult, and this suffering comes in life.
And that's the other thing, is this well, just pick up your cross, right? This is just hard because this is just picking up your cross here. And I think that this is what is so hard for LGBT people. This is what was so hard for me, is because anytime there was struggle, anytime I was like, gosh, like this just doesn't. This feels like too much. It feels like this is such a greater burden compared to other people. I would hear people tell me, oh, well, I understand that you're attracted to the same sex. Well, single women who really want to get married, like they struggle with loneliness too. And so then it became like, you're just not trusting God enough. You are just not picking up your cross. And it's this language again that's really dismissive. And instead of taking a moment to listen to being like, hey, there's an LGBT person in front of me. There's somebody who's gay. There's somebody with same-sex attraction in front of me. And they're saying, hey, actually, my experience, I don't feel like my experience is like a single woman who wants to get married. I feel like there's something different that's going on here. Actually, this feels like a really heavy burden that is greater than what the church asks of other people. And I don't know exactly what the solution is, but I'm just saying this is more than just picking up my cross. And instead of the church getting curious and listening, the church becomes dismissive and says, everybody suffers. Everybody's lonely. Everybody has their cross. This is just yours. We're all sinners. And I just want the church to listen to the stories of LGBT people, because this is just so new, right? The church has been dealing with this topic from a pastoral sense for barely 50 years. So why are we pretending like we have it all figured out?
Wills don't match up to the will of God. And this happens in all of our lives. And at these critical moments, we're faced with this question. Do I love God to the abandonment of my own will? Or do I love my own will to the abandonment of God's will?
And this is it, right? Like, I know I'm stopping a lot here, but then it's this faithfulness thing of like, well, if I am like questioning in any way the church's teachings, if I am being like, man, I feel like there is something to these desires, that these aren't just sexual, that there is a real desire for an emotional connection, that suddenly it's like, I'm rejecting God then in any questioning. Anything that is in any way out of line with the things that Jason's talking about here is then questioning my faithfulness to God. And I hope you can see how harmful that is, because it can never just be a small thing. It's like either I'm choosing my will or God's will. It is this black and white of like anything entertaining or anything trying to understand this interior life, anything that is not rejecting this experience of same-sex attraction is an affront to the will of God in my life. And I just wish that we could understand, how is God present in this? What actually is going on in my interior life here? We know that God works through our desires, that our desires are fundamentally good. So why are we being so dismissive of the desires of LGBT people? Why can't we stop and say, is there any good here? Is there anything of God in the desires that are coming up in my heart here? Instead of saying, nope, they're wrong, you need to interpret them, you just want friendship. Like, why isn't the church getting curious?
And at these points in life, what we need more than anything is fellowship. Because we can live without sex, but we cannot live without intimacy. Fellowship, friendship, people who love us enough to speak the truth to us and lead us closer to Christ. And, the Catholic Church has canonized people as saints who've been from all walks.
And like, yeah, that's like, I know I'm stopping a lot, but it's just this, it's just that dismissiveness again, right? Of just reducing this to a conversation around sex, saying you just need friendship, that's the solution, that's all there is. And then you've got people like me who are saying, hey, actually, this is more than just a conversation around friendship, that there is something different, to romantic attraction to somebody. Please listen. We're going to talk about saints now. This is my favorite thing in the world. What is he going to say? He's going to say we're waiting for our first gay saint. Newsflash. We'll talk about it.
We've got kings who were saints. We've got slaves who became saints. We have prostitutes and virgin martyrs who became saints. And I look forward to the day in the Catholic Church where there are canonized saints who experienced homosexual attractions and chose to glorify God with their bodies. No doubt.
Congrats. Jason, you don't have to wait. And even though this video is several years old, we had saints back then too. We don't have to wait. We have one, You can think of people like St. John Henry Newman. You can think like Henry Nouwen, whose cause is open for canonization. A more recent one is Father Michael Judge. Those are people who are like pretty clear. We have documentation where there is same-sex attraction. And then there is a whole host of people who are out there where it's suspected or it's thought that maybe they experience same-sex attraction. I know one that I love is St. Sergius and Bacchus. We have no way of knowing for sure, but though St. Sebastian's another one. Like these are people that are held up amongst the LGBT Catholics that I know, the circles that I move in, as people who are confirmed people who experience same-sex attractions, who were LGBT, or who are individuals who this might have been part of their life. And so I don't understand when I hear Catholics talk like this, like, we're waiting, because they're also the same people who are like, we don't, your identity, this part of you're being gay, this identity doesn't define you. This is just a part of your life. Being gay, you're making that a whole identity. So why would we want to have a saint who is known for being same-sex attracted, and that is their whole identity, right? You can't come out when you're alive, but the church can out you when you're dead. This makes no sense. Why aren't we then leaning on people who are known for their contributions to the church, like St. John Henry Newman, who was just declared a doctor of the church, who's got these incredible contributions and just so happened to experience same-sex attractions? Like, to me, that is the model. That is gold standard for what Jason would want. Why aren't we talking about them? And I think the problem is if the church were to actually start to admit the number of people in our churches, and especially probably because St. John Henry Newman was a priest, if the church started to acknowledge the number of LGBT people that were in our church, there'd be this huge reckoning, right? Because we know things like there's a significant population of priests who are themselves gay, who experience same-sex attractions. And having an out gay priest who's a saint and a doctor of the church, I think the church is avoiding it because we're not ready for that. Because if it's like, well, shoot, there's a saint, he's a doctor of the church, he was a priest, he can be out. Why can't other priests be out who want to be? Actually, this didn't disqualify him from being an amazing priest, from being a doctor of the church. So why would this disqualify or mean that my priest at my local parish can't be out and share this part of his life as well? Why are we making this such a big deal? If experiencing same-sex attractions, if being gay is not somebody's whole identity, then why can't priests just share about it as part of their life? Why do they have to be in hiding? The church has had enough secrets. We don't need one more. We are not waiting for our first gay saint, Jason.
This is difficult, but in those moments of your life when you sometimes don't accept yourself and you don't feel accepted by others, know that God is always the one who accepts you, that he loves you, that he has a plan for your life. And on behalf of anyone who has ever expressed any hatred or bigotry towards you, I ask your forgiveness on behalf of the church for the times that we have failed to love you properly. Because I'll tell you, I grew up in an all-boys high school, and at the time, it was an extreme...
I remember the first time I watched this, I was like, I was probably tearing up. And I would send this to people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's asking for forgiveness. I've been hurt by the church. Look at this, is so beautiful. Okay, Jason, what are we doing differently then? Right? We're going to have these platitudes of asking for forgiveness. What are the ways that the church has hurt LGBT people? And then this is my question. If you're going to ask for forgiveness, I think he's going to share a story about him in high school, saying the word gay or whatever. That's one thing. If you're saying the church has hurt LGBT people, my question then, which I don't think he's going to talk about, is how has the church hurt LGBT people? And then if we're going to ask for forgiveness, that usually, the church usually invites us to change our behaviors as well. So then what is the church doing differently to address how the church has hurt LGBT people. If you're a Catholic and you're like, yeah, I know how the church has hurt queer people, what are those things? What are things that you have done that the church has done that has been harmful, and what is the church going to do differently? Because asking for forgiveness is awesome, but if it's just a line on a video, then it's meaningless. And I hear this now, and I'm like, I haven't seen the church change. Actually, in many ways, when I think about the church in the United States and the popular figures in the past 5 years, I have heard the rhetoric get more antagonistic towards LGBT people, more demonizing of LGBT people. And any effort of Pope Francis, of Pope Leo to preach a message of compassion, of like welcome for LGBT people, it has been met with animosity and ridicule. And the church is not getting better, right? If we're going to ask for forgiveness, we need to do something differently.
Homophobic environment. We're all so insecure. You're gay. No, you're gay. No, you're gay. You know what we were being? There's actually a theological word for it. It comes from the Greek idiotes, and in English, it's idiot. Okay, that's what we were being. And so as a result of this, I need to ask your forgiveness. And I've outgrown that garbage, but unfortunately, some people haven't. And so we need your friendship.
Trying to be nice here. I'm really trying to be nice here. Okay, so he's like, and I think this is a moment where again, Catholics can be dismissive. Okay, let's assume good intent here of him saying, look, I was bad when I was a kid. I'm better now. And I think it's really easy for Catholics to say, I get with, I resonate with that. I call people, oh, that's so gay when I was growing up, but I don't do that now. And maybe you don't, maybe he doesn't, but just my invitation to any Catholic, when you're talking with LGBT people, if your goal is to treat them with love, right? The most loving thing to do, is part of that is just to have the humility to say, hey, have I ever said anything that has been hurtful or harmful to you? What's your experience like with the church? Has the church hurt you? What's that been like? And just have the compassion and the humility to listen and understand that there might be things that you have done that have been hurtful that you don't realize. Because it's not enough to say, hey, this was something that I did, when I was a kid, that there might still be things going on. There might be patterns of behavior. There might be things in the church that are still going on that the church needs to address.
Life. And I hope you'll realize that you could use ours as well. Because I'm sick and tired of the media telling us that we all hate each other. Because that's not true. We love you and we need you in our lives as well. And the church is your home. You're called to communion, and let's do this thing together. No more of this they and us, we and them. All it is us. The family of God with all our different crosses, stumbling together through life, trusting in the Father who has a plan for each one of us.
Isn't that like, we put a bow on it. It's not us and them, it's all just us. And like when I hear that, I just think of a quote that I came across years ago from St. John Bosco. And the original quote is, it's not enough that you love the youth must know that they're loved. And I have adopted this as kind of, something that I come back to time and time again of like, Catholics, it is not enough that you love LGBT people. They must know that they are loved. And so I think videos like this, again, stuff that I used to send to people that really resonated with me at the time, now being on the opposite side of this conversation here, I'm just like, this doesn't resonate with me. It actually still feels like us and them. I don't get the sense that Jason actually understands what this is experienced like, how exactly the church has hurt LGBT people, what patterns of behavior exists that are continuing that divide between the Catholic Church and LGBT people, even for LGBT people who want to stay in the Catholic Church. And so I would just say, if we're going to say it's not us and them, if we're going to say that the church wants to love LGBT people, it's not enough to just do things and say things that make us feel warm and fuzzy as Catholics of like, look at us, so, we've got this olive branch. We're saying we're bridging that divide. We have to see how this community is responding. Is it actually resonating? And I can say for me personally, and for so many other of friends, people I know, that videos like this still fall short. That there's something of how the church is approaching it that like there's still a divide here. And if people are like, hey, well, you just don't get it. You're just not willing to dialogue. I'm here. I am watching these videos. I'm sharing with you how to do this. I am here for dialogue. But if I'm saying, hey, the church has hurt me, the church is continuing patterns of behavior, saying language like what he's talking about here, of like we're all just picking up our cross without acknowledging the unique experience of LGBT people in any capacity, that is unhelpful. That's me sharing that. And if we're just going to dismiss that, then I have done what I can, and we can't have a conversation then. So the next time you watch this video or you see another one like it, I would just ask you to consider that this is the perspective of a straight man trying to understand what it's like to be an LGBT Catholic. And I know he means well. I know he has had numerous conversations with people in this community, but there is still a difference between a straight man talking about an LGBT person's experience and actually listening to the experience of someone who is LGBT, especially those who are in the church or who have left the church. And so my invitation to you is to do the difficult work, to step into those difficult spaces of listening, of being curious, and to not let a video inform you what somebody's life is actually like, but to that, to that child, to that sibling, to that friend, to that person stranger on the street, whoever it is that you meet, it has this experience, to take a moment and not jump into the most loving thing is tell the person the truth, but to take a moment and treat this person as the child of God that I know you know that they are, to treat them with love, with compassion, and to take the approach of Jesus, who so often, when he was engaged with people, started by asking questions, learned what was going on in people's hearts, learned what their desires were, what they wanted, what brought them to this point in their life, and to not just assume these things about LGBT people as if the fact that somebody uses that word immediately means that that's their whole identity, right? This isn't politics. These aren't. LGBT people aren't political talking points. We're not items in an agenda. We are human beings who have an emotional life, who in many ways have been hurt by the church. And we can't start that process of reconciliation until we're actually having a dialogue and understanding what that hurt actually is. I think it's time that we stop telling LGBT people that it's not us and them and start treating them like that. And in the same way that we as Catholics, we want to be understood, we want to be listened to, we want people to trust us, that we need to start listening and trusting and trying to understand the LGBT community as well. This is difficult work. This is challenging love that costs us something, because it's not a matter of simply saying things to make us feel comfortable, but listening to things that might challenge us to live differently. Because it's not enough that the church loves the LGBT community. The LGBT community must feel loved by the church as well.